I was still working on coffee when she come and got me.
Oh, well, I'm sorry I had to stop your coffee.
Well, he yanked me away from the breakfast table this morning, so I've been rushed all day.
Yeah. Where did you go this morning?
We went to a high school program at Hopkins Central.
Yeah. I was just saying that I've been doing sitting down interviewing people that I think are interesting and sharing it with other people. Be okay with you if we just talk a little bit about your life?
Yes.
Okay. I was reading you were born in 1922. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Where were you born at?
In Christian County, Kentucky.
Yeah. And
out in the country near Cerulean,
yeah.
Kentucky.
Okay. And is that where you grew up, or did you grow up in Dawson Springs?
My dad owned a 500-acre farm in that Cerulean area, and at that time, is 1936, the government determined that that farm area was no longer productive, and so they were going to buy up all that land and relocate the farmers to more productive farming area. And my dad sold his farm there, and he bought a place down near Dawson Springs.
Yeah.
4 miles out of Dawson Springs. And I went to high school in Dawson Springs, and I walked that 4 miles every day to go to high school.
To go to school. You really had to want to go to school then, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So did you have any brothers and sisters growing up?
I was the youngest of 9 children.
Wow.
2 sisters were older than the 6 brothers, older than me.
Yeah.
And I tell the story that they all had double names, two names.
Yeah.
Like Ernest Vernon and William Archie, and they'd run out of names when they got to me, and I'm stuck with Dudley.
Just Dudley? Do you have a middle name, or is it just Dudley?
There was no middle name there.
They could have started over and used another name that they had already used, couldn't it? So did you and your brothers, I'm sure there was a lot of wrestling and mischief y'all got into having that many brothers, wasn't there?
Back in the 30s and 40s, recreation was rather scarce in the country. We'd have sandlot baseball games and things of that nature, but once in a while the rodeo would come to town, and a little bit of auto racing.
Yeah.
But that's about all.
That's about it. So it was pretty laid back growing up back then?
Jobs were non-existent
Yeah.
at that time, and I had been in high school for 2 years, and the Army was heavily recruiting at that time and building up the forces in the Army, and I volunteered for service in 1940, and went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and by some test, they determined that I would make a good radio operator.
Yeah.
So they sent me to radio school, and I was a radio operator then during my time in combat.
Yeah. So did you you went to like a boot camp as well, or a training?
I'm sorry?
Did you go to like a boot camp when you first got in the military?
Not really. They at that time they didn't have the replacement centers, and I went directly to my company of with the 16th Engineers, and I went to school from my company area to the radio school.
Yeah.
And I missed the boot camp.
Yeah. So were you glad you missed it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So what type of radios did you use?
We had I had the first thing I had to do was learn Morse code.
Yeah.
And we encoded messages through with Morse code, and I had 312 radio receiver and a 510 transmitter, and it mounted in a half track, and with the company commander, and the messages was coded, sent in code, and I decode the message and give it to the company commander.
Yeah. How long was your training?
How long? We were in active combat for about 3 months.
Yeah.
From the time we landed in Old Rand, North Africa. Old Rand is in Morocco, isn't it? Anyway, we had scrimmages just off and on, and patrol battles. The 300 miles across North Africa from Oran to past Constantine and on to Tunis. But in between there was Kasserine, and the 3-day battle of there at Kasserine, we lost 150 tanks in a 3-day battle, and the Grant tank that we were using was no match for the German 88 millimeter gun. The shell would penetrate the hull of the Grant tank, explode inside, and leave a terrible mess of the 5 guys inside. And a tanker is just no good without a tank.
Yeah.
So I was taken prisoner there, and the Germans could not get a ship into the Mediterranean Sea. The British and Americans had the Mediterranean well blocked to sea traffic, and the Germans flew us from Tunis Airport to Palermo, Sicily, and we were there in Palermo for about 2 weeks, and the Americans and British were making preparations to invade Sicily, and they bombed quite heavily. We were bombed several times. The Americans were not aware that there was a prison camp there, so we had some close calls.
Yeah.
Building was hit, and civilians out in the street were killed from the bombing raids before we were moved across to Italy. And there in Italy was my most uncomfortable time as a POW. There was not a building of any sort, open country, and holes that had foxholes that had been dug by the previous group going through. So we were just stuck in the foxhole, and we were there a couple of weeks, and into boxcars and crowded. The European boxcar is about half the size of an American boxcar, and they are marked 40 and 8, which is 8 horses and 8 horses and 40 men, I believe is the way they counted it.
Yeah.
And they doubled the figure, crowded us out in, and we had about 60 or 80 live bodies. On the toilet facilities was a 3-gallon bucket, and in the corner of that boxcar, and we spent 6 days going from all the way up through Italy into Germany, and we were put into a Stalag 7A, which was a processing camp. There we were photographed, fingerprinted. Our record started there, and we were there about 2 months, I guess, and before we were moved into a permanent camp, which was Stalag 3B at Furstenberg on the Oder River. And this was another trip in a boxcar, and all the way across Germany, and a train load of prisoners took very low priority when Germany was moving war equipment from all parts of Germany down through Italy, and we spent a lot of time on the side road letting troop trains and ammunition trains go whizzing by.
Yeah.
And it took 5 days to get us from Italy up into Germany.
So did you, when you finally started moving, where did they take you?
We were at Stalag 3B almost 2 years. We were there when Axis Sally, the German, well, she was an English girl that had somehow she was working in Germany when the war started, and she switched over to the German side and was helping with their propaganda. And she came through the prison camp, and I talked to her, and she filled out a card and put on the shortwave radio program, and that program was picked up by a man in Pennsylvania, and he got in touch with I think he maybe corresponded with my niece. I don't know how it was, but anyway, they had a letter from him, and that of course the name was muddled. They didn't know whether it was Wiley or Riley, and at Dawson, Kentucky, didn't have the Dawson Springs on it, and by hook or by crook, it finally made it to the post office, and they got it to my mother, and there's a note from the fellow in Pennsylvania, and I have that in my scrapbook.
That's awesome. I'm sure she was glad to get that. I'm sure your mom was happy.
Oh yeah, she was. She says that she had never given up. I was taken prisoner in February, and in March, the Army got word to my mother that I was missing in action. That was in March, and in August, they finally notified her that I was a prisoner of war and not killed in action.
Yeah. So, while you were in prison camp,
How long?
Well, what did you do while you were in prison camp?
Nothing. Counted the bedboards in the bed above.
Yeah.
Our bunks were 3 high, one down on the floor, then one about waist high, and the other one up above.
Yeah.
My bunk was in the middle, and I could count the 16 boards. And Big Charlie slept above me.
Big Charlie?
He's from Hopkinsville, and I counted those boards many times.
Yeah.
And we did get reading material. The YMCA got us a fairly decent library, and I did a lot of reading, and read Gone with the Wind while I was there, and we had very active baseball teams the YMCA got ball material, balls and bats, so forth, and we used a softball and used hardball rules.
Yeah.
And each barracks fielded a team of baseball, and games were well attended, even by the Germans. The Germans loved to watch it.
Yeah.
The prison camp was on sand. The canal had been built from Furstenberg, from Furstenberg to Berlin, and there was a lot of boat traffic along the side. But when the canal was dug, it was sand all along that area. So the prison camp was all built on sand, and they let us dig an air raid shelter in the sand, and we went down 8 feet to dig that air raid shelter, and it was sand all the way down.
Huh. So was your baseball team good? Was it good?
Food?
No, your baseball, your team. Oh. Did you win a lot?
The Barracks 20 had a professional player, Mickey Grasso.
Really?
From the Cleveland Indians.
Huh.
He was a prisoner, and they took most of the titles.
That's interesting. Huh. So when did you get free from that camp? When did you leave the prison camp?
This Stalag 3B was over near the Polish border in eastern Germany, and the Russians were coming from the east and were about to liberate our prison camp, and the Germans didn't want us to be liberated by the Russians, so they started us walking. One night at midnight, extremely cold, and some snow and ice on the road. We walked all that night, and we must have stayed in a church next night. They put 15 or 20 of us in any building that they could find along the way, and we'd spend the night there, then up and walking again next morning. And we were on the road 6 days, and my feet froze at that time, and I still have hammer toes and calluses on my feet. In fact, I'm found to be service-connected for cold injury, and my hands and face were frostbitten. So I'm very sensitive to cold weather, or even I don't like ice water.
So, were there many other men with the same injuries? Were the other soldiers have the same injuries?
Oh yeah, there was 5,000 of us in in that camp, and we was 120 miles from Furstenberg to Luckenwall, and we this was Stellang 3A, that the second place, and we were there about 2 months, and the Russians caught up with us and liberated the prison camp, and don't let anyone tell you that the Russians can be friendly. They're the most barbaric people that you ever dealt with, and they treat us worse than the Germans did, and food in particular. The Russian army did not have a supply truck or a kitchen truck or whatever, eating facilities. They survived what they captured that day from the Germans. By the time they got what they wanted, passed it down to us, it was food was just almost non-existent. I took all I could stand of that for about 2 weeks, and I got 11 of my friendly buddies, and we escaped from the Russians, and for 5 days we were out on the German countryside, and found that the German civilians were glad to have an American soldier come in and sleep in their barn that night to protect them from the Russians. That was all Russian territory. Russia had occupied all of Germany, and we made it. One morning we were out on the highway, and I saw a convoy, or no, it was a tank, light tank. He was really speedy, and got up to us as a brigadier general in that light tank, and we flagged him down, and he said that there was sit down there on the side of the road. Said he had a convoy of trucks right behind him. Said they'd come pick us up, and they the trucks picked us up and took us to Hildesheim Airport, and we flew into Reims, France, for rehabilitation, and we were there about 2 months, getting fed back into decent and new uniforms, partial pay, and on the boat 6 days to get back home.
Yeah. So I heard, did you go to New York?
New York.
Yeah.
We got into New York Harbor in the late evening, and the pilot would pilot our boat or our ship into the docks until next morning. And we had to sit there and look at the Statue of Liberty, and see the lights over New York City. Finally, we got over there and unloaded.
Yeah. And then you went home?
very swiftly. They are very comfortable with uh, getting us dressed, and we went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and the next day we were out and on a train for Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and there we were processed. The next day, we were given a 75-a-day temporary duty at home.
Yeah.
And so we went directly home, and before the 75 days was up, they had dropped the atomic bomb and added 15 more days to our leave.
Yeah.
That made 90 days, and by that time we were ready for discharge.
Yeah. When you went home, did your parents know you were coming home?
Mother said that she had never lost hope, but Daddy said that there was 6 months there that he was doubtful that when I was reported missing in action, he lost hope.
Yeah.
And was tearful, I will say, when he was out in the tobacco patch hoeing tobacco when I came back, and he dropped his hoe and hugged me.
It's making me cry, Dudley.
I had married after I went in service, and my wife had rooms rented, and we started the process on buying a house while I was on the furlough, and we ended up going to Chattanooga, Tennessee for our rehabilitation, and my wife she stayed in Chattanooga part of the time while I was at Chattanooga, or while I was at Camp Oglethorpe, Fort Oglethorpe. And, she became pregnant. I wondered why. And she wasn't feeling well, so she came home before I was able to get my discharge. Started a family. Ended up with 5 wonderful children.
Yeah.
My son was in Vietnam. Lost my oldest daughter, brain tumor. 56 years old. Lived in Indianapolis for 30 years, and moved back to Kentucky after my wife died. My wife died in 1988, and remarried. We've been married 30 years plus now.
Yeah.
She lives in Dawson Springs.
Yeah.
Seeing Statue of Liberty coming home was exciting. Seeing that German brigadier general in a tank was exciting. That's when we weren't exactly sure we were liberated when we with the Russians.
Yeah.
They were more strict than the Germans were, and that's when we first felt like we were liberated. Was when we met the general and got on the truck and back to the airport.
Yeah. You received a Purple Heart?
I've got that since I've been here at the center.
Yeah.
It was on the frozen feet, or they called it cold injury.
Yeah.
But I have trouble with my feet, have hammer toes. All my toes are turned down, and the nails scratch, shoot, intersole.
Huh.
And on the left foot, I have a callus that the bone protrudes up against the skin, and the doctor has to trim that off every 3 months or so.
Yeah. What do you want people to learn from your story?
Don't trust those Russians.
Yeah. Well, I think your story, it's inspiring.
Oh, I have written a book.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about.
Have you have the title?
No, I didn't write it down. What?
Farm Boy, Soldier, Daddy.
Yeah.
And I've donated 2 to this library.
Yeah. I looked for it earlier but couldn't find it in here.
They have no checkout system here, so they've both disappeared.
Yeah. When did you write that?
I was in with Representative Ballard when this place was being built, and that was when my book was published, and I donated a book then, and when I came in here as a resident, I donated another one, and they're both gone.
That must mean it's good. It must be a good book.
I get a lot of compliments on it.
Yeah.
How do we get it?
Yeah.
I said, come up with $3,000 for up front to get it reprinted.
So, can people buy it anywhere? Or where could I get one?
Pardon?
Where could I get one?
You could find a transcript of it on YouTube.
Okay.
Under that time, World War II, POW, Dudley Riley is on YouTube.
Okay.
And, I'm sold out, and it's in the Madisonville Library and Dawson Springs Library, and several people around here have copies of it.
Yeah. Okay.
I attended a lot of POW conventions, and there'd be a group of us around the table telling stories. Some of them true.
Yeah.
my wife was listening in, and she said, well, why don't you write some of that down and make a good story? So she got me a tape recorder, and she says I started talking, having to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife is a tour guide with the museum at Princeton, Ansmore Museum, and she works with a woman that had. I read two of her books before, Life of Other People. One of them was people had been displaced when the land between the lakes was formed.
Yeah.
They called it Twixt the Rivers. And I thought she did a good job on it. It's her own life, too. And so I'd dictate a couple of reels, and his wife take them to work with her, and Barbara would put them in the computer, and I think she sent about 4 different copies for me to proofread. I didn't know that you spell taters with a P until I started to send the copies over there. She'd correct it.
Yeah.
Send it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you learned something then. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to share?
Nothing comes to mind.
Yeah. All right.
I will say that this place is a godsend. It is not home, but it's a place for the end of life, I guess you would say. Most of us here are getting to that age, and I'm in much better condition than most of them here.
Yeah. Yeah. So they take good care of you? They take good care of you?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, good. Good.
This place has been kind to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you